Hello there folks, welcome back to the Chap's Guide. My name is Ash and I'm your host on this journey through men's style, self-development and personal grooming. Now today is a special day. It is Saturday the 6th of May 2023 and it will go down in history as the day of the coronation of King Charles III. Now a coronation day is a special occasion where the country gets to trot out its pageantry and we get to crown our new monarch in the full glare of the world's media. It's not really an ascension to the throne. That in effect took place when our beloved late Majesty the Queen died, and of course as heir to the throne Prince Charles became King Charles at that very moment. However, the coronation is a day of celebration and I thought I'd use this as an opportunity to revel for just a moment in the style which has been displayed to us by King Charles as something of a style leader during his whole lifetime. Because it has been almost a whole lifetime, for most of us anyway, depending on your lifespan, that King Charles has been waiting for this special moment. You know, at 74 years of age, as he is now, he spent a lifetime waiting to fulfill his destiny and become our king. Because, you know, it's a long time to wait for an apprenticeship. And he's led that lifetime, that period, in the full glare of social media. I think his mother, Queen Elizabeth, ascended to the throne at a very young age because of her own father's untimely early death. So I think Prince Charles, as he was, sort of was catapulted into the public's awareness at only the age of 4. And he's led this whole lifetime now with people monitoring his every move. And he's done so in what I would describe as a classically stylish way. So let's just take for a moment to unpack that style which has been demonstrated to us by King Charles. Okay, so let's talk about the evolution of King Charles from that young man into the stylish older man, the elder statesman of style that he very much has become. And when we look back upon it, you know, I think we have to look at some of the inalienable facts which are just present. His shape, for a start. So King Charles is a man who I would say has been fortunate with his genetics. He inherited the wiry, sort of lean, natural physique of his father, the Duke of Edinburgh, Prince Philip. And in his younger years particularly, that was very evident. He was a very athletic, fit-looking fellow. And I think he inherited some of that style as well from his father, who was, I think one would describe the Duke of Edinburgh as being a very traditional man, a very conservative man, but he knew how to dress fabulously well. And you know, that was evident even in his latter years when he was, I think, 99 at the time of his death. You know, when he was seen in his late 90s, he still looked sharp and dapper. And of course Prince Charles, as he was then, would have been exposed to this growing up. Now his natural frame, as I say, quite well proportioned. He is declared as being 5'10" in height. Now I have to say, when I met the King at the end of 2021, I met him in Windsor Castle. It was at an investiture ceremony and I was fortunate enough to receive an award from the Prince, as he was at that time, yet to ascend the throne. We had a few moments of a conversation whilst he bestowed the medal upon me, and I fancy that he was actually shorter than me. Now I'm 5'9". Used to be about 5'9.5", but I think I'm about 5'9" now, as I approach my mid-50s. I would hazard a guess that the King was around about 5'8" to 5'9", because I certainly, you know, when you look at somebody's eye level, you get an indication of their height. So I would say he's average height, shall we say. We're not going to argue over an inch here and there, but he's average height. So he's had that good proportions. And of course, he's also had the good fortune to have good fortune. You know, let's be honest. A member of the royal family, for the majority of his adult life, he was Prince of Wales, which allowed him access to untold wealth. You know, the Prince of Wales title comes with the Duchy of Cornwall, for those who are unaware. So he's also the Duke of Cornwall, the Prince of Wales, and I think that would make him a de facto billionaire in regards to assets and wealth. So he's never had the disadvantage of having to watch his pennies when it comes to choosing style. So when it comes to his journey to Chap Nirvana, he hasn't been held back by money, and he's also had the advantage of good natural genetics on which to place good clothes. And of course, as we said, good exposure to style mentoring. Because we looked at his father, classic, elegant, conservative. But also, don't forget, just one generation back, his great uncle, his mother's uncle, the Duke of Windsor, former king. Somebody who is, even to this day, renowned as being somebody who took forward many elements of men's traditional style. Let's just say he was an incredibly dapper man. I know there were personality flaws there, but he knew how to dress. And Prince Charles would have seen this in his close family circle, maybe not that close, because obviously the king was in exile at that point, but it was something which would have been present, at home, and he would have been aware of it. So on his style journey, he had some advantages for sure. Other influences which I think, you can see have shaped Charles in the way that he chooses to dress, I think paramount among them is his military service. Now, as a young man, as many royals do and have done for many years, he progressed from a university education into the armed forces. As future king, he would have been, prepared to become commander-in-chief of the British military, and as such, he went into the military, served in the Royal Air Force, the Royal Navy, and the British Army. So exposure to all of them. In fact, King Charles served 5 years of full-time military service, the majority of which I believe was in the Royal Navy. In fact, it culminated in him becoming the skipper of a small sort of coastal patrol vessel. And you can see that carryover of military style into his life, because, the Royal Navy uniform for an officer is often very identifiable by that double-breasted reefer jacket. And when we saw Charles in his earlier years, he often defaulted to a double-breasted reefer-style blazer as his choice for semi-formal situations, for sure. When you're not wearing a suit, it's difficult to choose, isn't it, when you're somebody in the public eye? And he often went for that double-breasted reefer-style jacket, which was very reminiscent, often, in fact, bearing brass or gold effect buttons, very similar to the navy garment. And that, I think, carried out throughout his life, because when you see his suit selections as he goes through life, certainly in the earlier element of his years, he always opted for double-breasted, which was quite militaristic uniform style, very formal. And that became his signature suit over many years. So you can see those influences, and the people, again, who he was exposed to. I believe he was quite influenced by his another family member, I believe he would have called it uncle, but Field Marshal or Admiral of the Fleet Louis Mountbatten, another military man who would have been a close influence on him during his younger years, and I know he was over Charles. So that military influence and that styling, very much evident in his clothing throughout the rest of his life. Now let's talk about some of his choices, because we're lucky, because of the system that we have here in the UK of certain members of the royal family being allowed to issue royal warrants, in effect seals of approval to the manufacturers and suppliers of certain items. We can see where the king throughout his life has purchased his garmentry, because as Prince of Wales, he was one of the three people during the majority of his life, the Queen, the Duke of Edinburgh, and himself, the Prince of Wales, who were in a position to issue royal warrants. So we see what he used to wear, and we know what he chose for suits. Now we know he chose Savile Row as his place to shop, unlike his father, who used an off-road tailor. For Charles, it was Savile Row. And we know he frequented Gives and Hawkes, but perhaps the one brand which is most synonymous with his clothing style is Anderson and Shepherd. Now they're a tailoring house which is right in the middle of Savile Row. They've been in existence since 1906, so well over 100 years now, and their house style is very much fluid, cutting lines. So not sharp and heavily tailored, not close to the body, but far more traditional, far more classical, and to my mind, very few of his suits have aged in their appearance when it comes to the style. Because, if you look at a suit which is cut in the modern era, very close to the body, look at a Tom Ford suit. You know, I imagine in a few years' time, as tailoring styles change, they're going to look dated. But if you go to a traditional tailoring house on Savile Row, who has a reputation for tradition, conservatism, quite classic looks, they're never going to go out of fashion. You can wear them for 20 years, 30 years, as long as they fit you. And if they don't fit you, you can get them retailored so that they do if you gain weight. It's always going to look good for you. And Charles has always favoured Anderson and Shepherd. Now, they look, as well as being really smart, they look really, really comfortable. And it's believed, if you can believe any rumours about the royal family, because there are so many, that Charles owns hundreds of suits which have been curated over his decades. Don't forget, he's 74. He's had a long time to buy all these clothes. He's curated this collection over many, many years. And I believe he employs either 4 or 5 valets. So these are gentlemen's assistants, if you want to call them that, who look after the clothing. They make sure that everything is laundered and pressed and the shoes are polished and so on. So he maintains this sort of small army of valets around his many estates, because obviously he has homes in London, he has his actual former home here in Gloucestershire, up the road in Highgrove House, where he spent a lot of his time. He has his palaces, he has his home in Scotland and so on. So he has this little army of valets who look after his kit, and as a consequence, you know, he's always looking sharp and presentable at any given time. So the suits have always been immaculate. Now, as a younger man, and I say younger until his 50s, as I say, he favoured a double-breasted suit. Very classic, very smart and conservative. It became his signature style. Double-breasted suit with his hand bashfully in one of the front pockets became his sort of resting stance. As he's got a bit older, as I say, he's in his mid-70s now, the physique has softened somewhat. Now he's choosing a single-breasted suit, which I think is more flattering for an older gentleman than perhaps the rigid uniform lines of a double-breasted garment. So very sharp, very stylish, still by Anderson and Shepherd, but he's evolved his style to match his evolving physique, which is a commendable route to take. Now, when it comes to footwear, the king is known to favour traditional styles. You know, black cap to Oxfords you'll often see him wearing. And when he's in the country, maybe a brogue will be the route that he chooses to take. These are what you'd expect for somebody who lives his life in town and country, as the king often does. Now, he chooses brands, as again, looking at the royal warrants, we can see that he favours Crockett & Jones. He favours Trickers. But one of the more famous brands he's associated with is, of course, John Lobb. And we can see through observing the clothes that he wears and his shoes that he has worn some of those shoes for decades and decades. It's believed he currently owns a pair of John Lobb shoes, which he's had repaired numerous times now for well over 40 years. And he frequently wears them on his public duties. So you can't argue that these shoes are a worthy investment. Of course, John Lobb, they would cost you in excess of £5,000 to have a bespoke pair of these shoes made. But it's a worthy investment if you're going to wear them for 40 or 50 years. And when they break down, maybe they need a repair, they can go back to the workshop and have those patches put on, as Charles has clearly done on his shoes worn in public. And he also favours the mirror shine. When you see him dressed up, you know, at a public event, opening a hospital, you know, representing a charity as patron, his shoes are always mirror shine. They've got that perfect glaçage. Now, that's credit to the valet, of course. I'm sure King Charles doesn't spend much time with his sort of cloth and a bit of polish, but it's the image which he displays. Sharp, impeccable. And of course, that's what you expect from somebody in the public eye and an ambassador for your nation every single minute of his life. Along with those shoes, of course, he has to wear socks. And I know that he wears socks from the famous Corgi sock factory down there in Carmarthenshire in South Wales. I know it because I have visited that factory. I've had a tour of the factory by the factory owner, and they are very proud of their association with good King Charles and the fact that he gets all his socks from Corgi. And I asked them when I was having the tour of the factory, and I've done a video of this to come up shortly, does he actually wear your socks? You know, is this just a ploy when it comes to these marketing things with royal warrants? And the owner said to me, absolutely. Do you know what? I sent him a package of socks just a few days ago, and we believe he'll be wearing corgi socks on his coronation day. So, you know, we know he wears the very best. I bought a few pairs of socks when I was at the corgi factory. It's a very accessible brand and something which we can all enjoy, not just by royal appointment. Now, Charles is somebody who very much dials in the accessories, I've noticed over the years. We know through his royal warrants, again, that he wears Dent gloves, the best gloves in the world, made 50 miles from where I'm sitting now. The company was founded in 1777, and they still go on the hands of royalty, kings and emperors to this very day. Ties. When you see King Charles, he always has a tie on. In fact, even in what I would consider to be somewhat non-formal situations, you know, when he's out for a walk, you'll see him wearing a tie. He's a classic, elegant gentleman. But his ties are quite unusual. He usually wears regimental ties. You know, you'll recognise the lines of the regimental tie, but also he wears these really tight little knots in a half Windsor knot and it always seems as if they're too tight and they're sort of garrotting him. And they're quite thin ties quite often, Charles's choices are. So, interesting route that he takes in the ties. I also noticed that he wears his ties relating to the events which he's attending. So if he's going to a military investiture or something like that, he will go out of his way to make sure he's wearing the correct tie for that situation. Because obviously he's the patron of umpteen charities, the colonel-in-chief of practically half the regiments in the British Army. But he's always got the right tie on at the right occasion. Again, hats off to the valet. Now, when we look at the other accessories, one thing you will never see Charles missing from his outfit is the good old pocket square. Always got a pocket square on, never wears his suits naked. And he favours just the simple puff method, just shove it all in, tease it out so it looks rather nice. Always a complementary pocket square to the rest of his outfit, always a beautiful selection, and never omitted from an outfit. And it's worth recognising that and following that path yourself. Now, when it comes to the other parts of his suit, his lapels. He sees his lapels as the billboard of his clothing. And you will rarely see him these days without a boutonniere, adding a bit of passion and a bit of colour to his outfit, but also he's taken to wearing several badges. Particularly, again, if he's representing a charity or a special occasion, he will wear the lapel badge which relates to that event. And he's often seen wearing more than one. So a lot of attention to detail is employed by Charles with his outfits. It's not left to chance. He doesn't leave the same badge on day after day. I imagine he's got a huge collection of these things, and they choose the badge for the events that he's taking part in that particular day. So, you know, very much attention to detail being dialed in to the finest level. Now, when it comes to outerwear, I think you could say King Charles is something of a traditionalist, often wears, you know, long overcoats when appropriate, when in the city, and always cuts a fabulous dash. The Ulster style overcoats, quite heavy, you know, thick woolen coats normally. In the country though, he knows how to delineate between town and country, and you often see him wearing Barber. We know he chooses Barber because they hold a royal warrant, as of course I think all the royal members of the royal family did, the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh. And the Barber jacket, the perfect accompaniment for the outdoor focused gentleman. As we know, King Charles is an advocate of the countryside and the outdoors, and really misses an occasion to spend time in the greenery of the British countryside. Now, one of the things which particularly impresses me about King Charles and his style is that despite vast wealth and the ability to access any brands in the world, he shows an incredible attention to frugality throughout his style evolution. Because, you know, when a garment wears out, he could easily discard it and have another one made. As I say, he's a de facto billionaire in essence, you know, vast wealth at his disposal. However, it's well documented visually and in pictures that he has things patched as a matter of course. We see suits where he has patches on the pocket because he won't just throw it away. He gets it repaired. He's got overcoats that he's worn for decades and decades, and they've been patched time and time again to keep them going in service. So he's not somebody who is, you know, not prepared to spend money. Yes, of course he does. He buys the finest things, but he makes them last. Those shoes, 40, 50 years in his service, the same for some of his clothing. So there is no waste, and I see that as a very attractive element. Now, one of the brands which I forgot to mention was his shirts, Turnbull and Asser. The reason why I mention these specifically is because Turnbull and Asser, fabulous custom shirt maker on Jermyn Street in London, they were the first ever royal warrant which Charles chose to issue in 1980 when he took on this ability to issue royal warrants. And he still wears these sleek, beautiful shirts by Turnbull and Asser to this very day. I own a few of their shirts, not their bespoke section, just ordinary off-the-line shirts, and I've actually purchased all of those through eBay. In fact, I'm wearing one right now. And I bought this for £5 in a thrift store. To buy one of their shirts in a bespoke version would probably be about £300, and you have to order them in batches because they're made specifically around a template to your body. So they have to be economically viable for the Turnbull and Asser to make. But I think it's magnificent that Charles, chose his first warrant to be a shirt maker, actually the same shirt maker that makes shirts for James Bond, for the majority of the Bond history, the cinema canon for sure anyway. So some of these brands, iconic, but accessible to us as well. You don't have to be a millionaire to buy or share the shirts which are worn by the king. I paid £5 for this shirt, and it was purchased in a thrift store. And the king probably wears one, yes, the same. He paid full price for it though. So there we go. It's open to all of us. Some interesting stuff. Now, of course, I couldn't leave bloody flies. I couldn't leave a conversation about King Charles and his style without mentioning the wristwatch that he wears. And there's an interesting wristwatch which he chooses. It's not what you think. Over his journey, of course, he's had the best. For much of his life, he was seen wearing a Patek Philippe Calatrava wristwatch. He's been known to wear Cartier wristwatches. He's been known to wear, what's the other ones he wears? Definitely wears a Reverso by Jaeger-LeCoultre. In his earlier years, when he was a military man, he was an aviator, a pilot, he wore a Hamilton pilot's watch. He wears the practical watches of the era. But in the latter years, he is most commonly seen wearing, and I've got to read this because I'm not very good with this watch brand, I'm not familiar with. It is a Parmigiani Fleurier chronograph from their Toric range. And essentially it's a 40mm gold cased watch with a dark coloured leather band, which is a chronograph, so there's several subdials on that dial, and it's been the watch of choice for the king for, well, the last few years. Not forever though, because that brand only came into existence in 1996. So it shows in a way that Charles is not somebody sort of hog-tied by tradition and will only buy heritage brands. He's been a sort of champion of this Parmigiani brand, which is relatively new. They're not outrageously expensive. I mean, this watch today, if you were to track one down, they're no longer in production, that particular model. But a similar model today, if bought secondhand, would be in the region of £20,000 to £25,000. Would have been a hell of a lot less when he bought it. So this is not elite level watchmaking. It's accessible. And this is what King Charles chooses to wear for day to day. Not like many of the other royals who go a little more avant-garde. You'll see them wearing Rolexes and Omegas. I don't believe Charles has worn any of those sort of more vulgar Swiss brands like Omega and Rolex. He limits himself to the more classical brands. So very interesting watch choice. We'll see what he wears later today on the coronation, but I would guess it would be that Parmigiani Fleurier, that chronograph from the Toric range, but we'll wait to see. So there we go. In summary, I would say that King Charles is a man who lives up to the icon of being a classic, elegant, timelessly dressed man who deeply cares about the image he projects through his clothing. He is not somebody who just throws on the same suit. He's not somebody who doesn't care about his appearance. He has curated an amazing collection of beautiful clothes, the best in the world. He keeps them for a long time. He cares for them deeply. He looks after them. He makes his investment pay. When it comes to the wearing of his clothing, he has things repaired. Everything is not a mistake. It's worn carefully. The badges, the pocket squares, the ties, everything is chosen specifically for the occasion that he's going to. And it gives me confidence to know that there are men like King Charles on his own journey to Chap Nirvana that I can follow, that we can look at and replicate their style in our own small way, without spending vast amounts of money, but we can certainly take influence and inspiration. So there we go. Congratulations to King Charles on his coronation today. From one loyal subject here who's taken the oath more than once to be in your service, I wish you all the best for your continued reign. Long may it be. If you've enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more, click the subscribe. If you'd like to contribute, leave a comment in the comment section below. And if you'd like to support the channel, you can either buy me a coffee or you can even become a patron. Over on my Patreon page, the link to which you'll find in the show notes below, I provide additional videos for my esteemed patrons whose names you will see after the main video. So until then, enjoy the big day with pride and passion. And let me just get my pocket square out here. In case you hadn't already noticed what it is, I'm showing my patriotism on this very special day today by way of a specially selected pocket square. So until the next time, take care, and I will see you again very soon.